Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 27, Losing My Religion. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So in this episode, there aren't any new patients. We're still dealing with Burke, who now has a tremor after his surgery, Denny, whose heart surgery goes fine, however, dies most likely of a blood clot from the sutures, causing him to have a stroke, and then Camille, who is obviously having a cancer diagnosis, and to meet Adele's request from the last episode, is having a prom thrown for her at the hospital. The prom does cause a lot of drama. Derek and Meredith decide to be unfaithful to their partners together. Callie and George fight about the fact that he can't say he loves her yet, but eventually he does get through to her that he wants to mean it and asks her to give him the time to be able to mean it. During the prom is when Denny dies, so Izzy ends up crawling into bed with him in her prom dress, and everybody gets called away from the prom to try to help her out of the room. Christina manages to finally show up for Burke after balking throughout the entirety of the last episode, and even parts of this episode at the beginning. We do have Doc being put down, which is unfortunate. Finn wants to make plans with Meredith, which makes her choosing just that moment to be unfaithful even worse. And that's pretty much what happens in this episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, it is now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score, followed by the personal ranking list. And now we have our mostly objective rank values. The first we'll start with is our 2 pointers, and we have our multi-episode supporting character development, which is Denny's death. Then we have our supporting relationship development, which is before he dies, Izzy does say yes to Denny's question about her marrying him that he asked before he went into surgery at the previous episode. At first, she's not sure that he actually meant it or even remembered it because he thought he was dying going into surgery. However, after he confirms that he did mean it and gives a passionate speech indicating that he meant it, she then leaves for a bit and then comes back and before prom and confirms that she will marry him. We then have our 3 pointers, which is the successful emotional impact of Doc's. So Doc needed to be put down. It's not like we didn't see it coming. We were forewarned. In previous episodes, he was sick. He had bone cancer. Prognosis did not look good. This episode, we find out it's moved into the brain, and that is why Finn then recommends that they put him down before he has to suffer any further, and they do end up putting Doc to sleep. Then we have the impact, and obviously it's successfully impacting because it's, well, for me personally, I do have a soft spot for animals, and especially as, you know, they were talking about how he was a good dog. They weren't like he wasn't their dog very long, but they have an emotional connection to him. And then as he was being put down, he was like pawing at them, and I was just like, oh, that is just so sweet, but also heartbreaking and terribly sad. So that one was successful. We then have our impactful, memorable moment line, etc. And this is, of course, Izzy in her pink gown getting into the bed with a dead Denny because she had wanted to show him her dress, and as she was in the elevator on the way up is when he had the stroke, so by the time she got to the room, he was already gone. I do want to honorably mention that the whole hospital prom like the theme of or the event of having a prom at the hospital was memorable in and of itself as well, but the points are really for that one specific memorable scene of Izzy getting into the bed with being in the bed with Denny in her dress. That brings us forward to the 4-pointers, and we have our multi-season main character development, which is Meredith and Derek having to put down Doc. And Izzy does quit at the end of the episode. She quits after Denny dies. She tells Richard that she cut the LVAD wires, nobody else was responsible, that she thought she was a surgeon, but she wasn't, and she quits. And then she walks out. Then we have our main relationship development, which is, of course, that Meredith and Derek engage in physical intimacies during the prom in a side room, which Callie walks in on after. And the only reason she did that and they got found out was because of the Izzy situation where all of the interns were called to Denny's room to try to convince her to leave the bed. And then the end of the episode, we had Christina finally showing up for Burke. In the last episode, she walked away instead of helping him work through a decision, leaving him to make it on his own. Then she was brought into the operating room in order to keep him calm and ended up freezing and looking away. And even at the start of this episode, he even tells her that, he's not going to hold a grudge if she can't handle being with him now that he has a tremor. But at the end of the episode, we do see his hand having the tremor and her walking in to hold his hand as it tremors. And then we also, I forgot to mention it, but the multi-season main character development, additional to Izzy quitting, is also Burke now has a tremor. Then that's it for the positives, but we have accrued quite a large positive, number of positive points. Spoilers, we're not going to be able to come back from that. So we do have negatives, but it is a 10 out of 10 episode, at least objectively. First negative, however, that we have is the -2 points for infidelity. My personal opinion on infidelity is that it is probably the worst emotional crime that you can commit against somebody. Physically, yes, there's a lot worse things that can happen, but from an emotional perspective, I feel like the emotional damage that infidelity does is probably the worst damage that you can do to another person, especially somebody that you pretend or care about or have claimed to love, though personally I don't believe that you can ever cheat on somebody that you actually do love. So to me, anybody who says they love somebody then cheats on them is a big fat liar. For me, big moral issue, big ethical issue. I just hate every aspect of it. So that is obviously worth the -2 points. Then we have the supporting relationship regression or breakup, and that is that initially Callie says no to going to prom with George. However, during the prom, they do make up a little bit, kind of. He asks for time to mean saying I love you back, and she then just says, I hate that I'm so into you. But as they're together, when they go to the room and when she goes to get Meredith, I would say I think they're at least back to neutral. And then, of course, we have the fact that Finn and Addison were cheated on, though they do not know it at this point. They were cheated on. And then we have the -3 points, which is the failed emotional impact of Denny. Now, I liked Denny as a character. I have also said in many episodes that I didn't necessarily see anything wrong with Denny and Izzy falling in love, as you cannot help where you meet the person that you are going to love. However, I felt from day one, and I've said it in other videos, that as soon as Izzy started to have feelings that were more than patient doctor for Denny, she should have excused herself from the case. She should have let others know. She should have only interacted with Denny on a personal capacity as a visitor, never as a doctor. And the fact that this unethical behavior of Izzy's, it left a bit of a shadow, I should say, over the situation between her and Denny, because as much as I'm like, I like that you guys fall in love, I like both of you as characters, I know you can't help where you meet the person that you're going to fall in love with, and I don't think you should give up on a potentially amazing love of your life just because you met them under less than ideal circumstances. The fact that she was unethical throughout the relationship, even the fact that in the last episode she stole this heart, it feels a little bit like, on the one hand, you've got karma. I mean, you stole a heart from a father of two. Now that heart is wasted because you died of a stroke the day after. But also, I felt like I was very distant from the relationship and the characters because I was so disapproving of Izzy's behaviors within the relationship by not excusing herself from the case and making these types of decisions as the doctor from the standpoint of I have a personal relationship with this patient felt very unethical to me, so I never really got behind it, so I always had that distance. And because I was distant and distanced from that relationship, when the character dies, when the relationship ends, as emotional as I believe they were trying to be, I was already kind of removed from it because of all of the actions that were taken within that relationship while it lasted, if that makes sense. So for me personally, I did not feel the emotional impact of Denny dying as I think they had meant us to, because I personally took a look at the whole picture and was already kind of stepping back from this, and therefore from being stepped back, could not feel it to the extent that it should have been felt. So it failed for me. Either way, as I already mentioned, 10 out of 10 for our mostly objective ranking. So that now brings us into our season 2 rankings, and this is our definitive list as this was the finale of season 2, as I mentioned. And as always, I will remind everybody that we rank on the mostly objective ranking list in episode order when more than one episode shares the same score. So keeping that in mind, our definitive final list for season 2 is in first, we have Make Me Lose Control. Second, Into You Like a Train. Third, Begin the Begin. Fourth, Tell Me Sweet Little Lies. 5 is Break On Through. Sixth, As We Know It. Seventh, What Have I Done to Deserve This? Eighth, The Name of the Game. Ninth, Losing My Religion. 10th, Deny, Deny, Deny. 11th, Thanks for the Memories. 12th, It's the End of the World. 13th, 17 Seconds. 14th is Enough. 15th, Something to Talk About. 16th, Let It Be. 17th, Much Too Much. 18th, Yesterday. 19th, Superstition. 20th, Bring the Pain. 21st, Blues for Sister Someone. 22nd, Band-Aid Covers the Bullet Hole. 23rd, Damage Case. 24th, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. 25th, Owner of a Lonely Heart. 26th, Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. 27th, Deterioration of the Fight or Flight Response. Bringing us to the personal ranking. I spoke about most things over the course of the summary and the mostly objective ranking, so I don't have too much to add as far as what happened. I will say that something that didn't really fit into either of those was that while Richard is trying to get to the bottom of who cut the LVAD wire, he decides to have individual conversations with each of the interns. And I thought it was a really fun scene with each of them because they were all kind of treating him almost like their therapist, going over like their own personal issues in lieu of telling him who cut the LVAD wire. And I thought that was amazing, and it was very funny. But ultimately, because of some of the negatives that occurred, infidelity, big unforgivable for me, the unethicalness of Denny's and Izzy's relationship, which ultimately ended up with bad karma that ended up having Denny pass away just after getting the heart. As much as I liked the episode and I felt like there was more positives than negatives, those two big negatives meant I couldn't give it a 10 out of 10. I decided, therefore, to give it a 9 out of 10 on the personal ranking, just because I couldn't justify a 10 with my big no infidelity, and then the fact that Denny's death ended up being less impactful than it should have been for a good character because of the circumstances that character was put in, having a distancing effect. So, with it being a 9 out of 10, I'll now say our definitive personal rankings for season 2 are as follows, and in first we have As We Know It, second It's the End of the World, third Damage Case, fourth Deterioration of the Fight or Flight Response, fifth Make Me Lose Control, sixth Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, seventh Losing My Religion, eighth Something to Talk About, ninth 17 Seconds, 10th Into You Like a Train, 11th Break On Through, 12th was Deny, 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 13th Let It Be, 14th Tell Me Sweet Little Lies, 15th The Name of the Game, 16th Begin the Begin, 17th Blues for Sister Someone, 18th Thanks for the Memories, 19th Much Too Much, 20th was Yesterday, 21st Superstition, 22nd Enough is Enough, 23rd Bring the Pain, 24th was Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, 25th was What Have I Done to Deserve This, 26th Owner of a Lonely Heart, and for me, the last place 27th episode was Band-Aid Covers the Bullet Hole. And that now brings us to the series ranking so far, and we can officially put Season 2 into its final ranking, as it now has its final score. So on the mostly objective ranking, reminder that Season 1 ended with 77.78%, and Season 2 got a total of 207 points out of a possible 270. However, this did leave it with only 76.67%, which means that Season 2 is second to Season 1. On the personal ranking, a reminder that Season 1 ended with 66.67%. Season 2 ended with a total score of 195 out of a possible 270, which did give it a percentage of 72.22%, putting Season 2 in first place and Season 1 into second. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 27, Losing My Religion. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.